Grand Slam Track is a new track league aiming to challenge the current stale market of competitive running, which is currently dominated by World Athletics Diamond League Series. It is being led by legendary sprinter Michael Johnson and is promising to revolutionise the track scene, with 4 competitions or slams being promised between April and June. But will this league fulfil Johnson's claims that it will save track, and is GST a serious competitor to the Diamond League? In this video, we are going to take a closer look at the good, the bad and the ugly of GST and see if it really is the track revolution it claims to be. Starting off with the good. The prize money for GST is far superior to any other competition, and it's certainly better than the Diamond League circuit, with $100,000 offered for the winner and a still very respectable $10,000 being offered for last place in every event in every Grand Slam. So as GST points out, an athlete could earn up to $400,000 in prize money if they win every slam. Now if you compare that to the pitiful prize money in the Diamond League circuit, there really is no competition. Winning a Diamond League event will net you $10,000 on average, the same pay as placing dead last in any GST meet. Even winning some of the Diamond League Plus meets or the Diamond League Final will net you $20,000 and $50,000 respectively, and this is after a recently introduced increase in prize money. The Diamond League also has steeper drop-offs in prize money for its athletes, with last place netting only $500 at the end of a meet. I mean, $500 for being an elite athlete, you may as well not even pay them at that point. One of the many issues with this is that athletes simply will not make enough money from the Diamond League to support their career professionally, and will have to rely on either another job or a sponsorship income to make ends meet. The advantage for athletes competing in GST, especially the contracted athletes, is that they can guarantee themselves a livable salary even if they come last in every single event. If more athletes can run full time, then of course the standard of competition will improve. Now for those who don't know, GST has 4 races and 4 challenges for each event. Races are permanently contracted athletes who are obliged to compete in all 4 slams. Challenges are more freelance athletes who will compete in individual slams and fill out the roster. The contracted athletes or racers will get nice perks such as business class travel to all meets, social media support and a base salary for being part of the league, which is again really excellent for athlete security. I think the best and strongest aspects of GST is this racer system, for 2 main reasons. One is that it allows GST to build their brand of specific stars who are more invested in the company. As we have seen clearly, GST has signed huge stars such as Signe McLaughlin-Aroney, Josh Kerr, Gabby Thomas, Cole Hocker, Fred Curley, Jess Hull, and a host of other prominent athletes. They are clearly serious about signing the best and have loads of really exciting races to get people tuning in. And realistically, these guys play a huge role in the interest for GST, and their name value offers more hype than GST's marketing, which is something I'll get onto soon. But I think the best thing about these races is their contractual obligation to compete in all 4 slams. One of the problems with Diamond Leagues is that there is no coordination in the race schedule to get the top athletes to compete against one another. So we often have races where there are only 1 or 2 people who are really top level athletes, and this can make many of the races boring. Especially near the start of the season where athletes may not be interested in competing yet, you're going to get a lot of fields where it's either going to be domination by one truly world class athlete in the race, or there just simply aren't any racers who are ranked top 3 or 5 in the world. There have also been whispers that this is partly due to certain athletes refusing to compete against each other, or only agreeing to join if certain other members are not present. Close races and rivalries is what makes this sport interesting for fans and newcomers. I mean, look at the explosion of interest in the 1500 metre in the past 2 years. It's no secret that this has been largely due to the Josh Kerr and Jakob Ingebrigtsen rivalry. Another benefit Johnson talked about is that GST can go to broadcasters and guarantee them big races 4 times a year, which I'm sure will help them secure better broadcasting deals. All the Diamond League can really do is say they'll have X races a year. These guys will probably compete at some point, can't say when. There might be some showdowns here and there, can't say when they will be or even if they'll happen. It's not a super attractive offer. Another thing to note about GST is the small but meaningful perks it offers athletes, like the business class travel. They also have less restrictions on their race kit, with GST encouraging them to customize their kits more with their sponsors, allowing athletes to benefit more from sponsorship deals. By contrast, the Diamond League stipulates that athletes' race kit can only have 1 manufacturer logo and 2 different sponsor logos, with certain limitations on the sizing of them. These gestures may seem minor, but I feel like they reflect a commitment to athletes' comfort and autonomy, and it acts as a nice gesture of goodwill that will hopefully make the athletes feel a bit more valued. Now on to GST's marketing, which I have mixed feelings about, but we're going to stay positive and start with the good aspects first. Now GST are framing themselves as being focused on racing instead of a more time trial nature of the Diamond League. Whilst of course the Diamond League is technically a race, the paces and wave-like technology in every endurance event makes things feel like a glorified fitness test, with less room for tactics. And this can give us some truly special performances from athletes, but I think it makes races feel quite boring and predictable as the fittest athlete normally wins. GST do not have any paces in their slams, which I think is a good choice and a nice way to separate themselves from the Diamond League. It also means that us as fans get the best of both worlds, with the Diamond League being good to see a fast race and record attempts, and GST being the best to see a tactical race with an exciting sprint finish. There is risk, of course, that we get stupidly slow races due to no one wanting to take on the race too much, but I think the money incentives for winning and the incentives to make the race more exciting in general will hopefully push athletes to keep the race honest. And I'm not against very tactical races, just as I'm not against time trial style races. I just think a mix is important, as they all have their pros and cons. Now, I think one of the benefits of this competition focused approach is that it lends itself well to building rivalries between athletes that will hype up the sport more. I sound like a broken record when it comes to talking about this, but in short, rivalries lead to more hype between races, especially when the rivalry becomes more personal for better or worse. And you can kind of see in GST's marketing that they're trying to lean into this and try to get fans excited for who will win some of the head-to-heads, which I do think is the right move and will only develop better as the slams continue and the rivalries naturally start to surface. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows with their marketing, however, because whilst the broad goals set out by GST is solid, their execution has been pretty uninspired. So now we move on to the bad of GST. If you look at some of their social media marketing, a lot of it feels very bog standard and manufactured. The interviews maybe have a couple semi-interesting questions here and there, but they're also filled with pretty uninteresting questions of how does it feel to sign with GST, how are you feeling to run the 5,000 meter, etc, etc. And if you look at their Instagram, it's not terrible by any means, but I feel like with the talent they have at their disposal, they could have done much more. Beyond major announcements on the development of GST, most of the reels and posts are behind the scenes on promotional stuff, basic athlete questions with a couple more personal things sprinkled in. It's not offensively bad, but it's received some pretty lukewarm responses, because it's just not making people care enough. Their YouTube is arguably worse. They have some athlete interviews with minimal views, and it seems they're not really focusing on their YouTube presence as much right now. Granted, once the slams start, it can be a nice place to upload clips and full races to build some hype, as well as pre and post event interviews. But take this example interview where they had Cole Hocker, the Olympic 1500 meter champion, on. The first third of the video asks questions like, what's it like getting the call from GST? Take us through the Olympic final. Who do you think will be the final GST racer? I mean, these questions aren't offensively bad, but they've either been done to death before, such as the Olympics, or are just plain uninteresting to most fans. Like, how else is a contracted athlete going to answer questions on whether he's excited to work with his contractor? He's not exactly going to say, yes mate, I don't know why I'm here, I couldn't give a shit about GST, but we'll see what it's like, I don't know. Runner Boy mentioned in his video, which partly covered Grand Slam track, some really solid marketing ideas, such as doing a game show with all the athletes and Michael Johnson as a host. Another idea he mentioned which I really like is getting big influencers to do training sessions with the athletes, allowing them to reach a big audience and show off the skill required in each sport. There could also be some more documentary style content like we see with brands like A6 and Brooks, or looking at other sports like the UFC Embedded series. This is posted in the build up to big fight cards and gives us insights into the athlete's training and personal life. It's not perfect by any means, but it's an enjoyable watch and helps build up hype for the fights. They're normally received and viewed pretty nicely as well. They may have started to do this with Josh Kerr's channel, but it's only one instance of it and it's not been received too well. Another thing is that when you look at some of the promo videos they've put out, you can see it's not really tailored to some of the athletes' personalities that they've signed. Take this video with the middle distance guys. You can tell they are trying to create that competitive, confident feel from each athlete. You know, they're making them do all the shushing, all the points, hyping up to some invisible crowd, that type of thing. And this really seems to work for athletes like Josh Kerr, who are known to be more confident and wear their feelings on their sleeve a bit more. But you can tell for the other guys, it just felt a bit cringe and unnatural. I mean, look at Nagus, man, this just feels painful to see. Nagus is a smiley, happy-go-lucky runner who listens to Taylor Swift in his free time. And this is what makes him a charming athlete in his own way, and it's garnered him a loyal fan base. But in this video, GST are kind of trying to mold him into this cool, more intimidating character, with this whole shushing images and hyping up the camera. But to me, this is an example of where GST's marketing angle feels at odds with the personality of the athlete they're promoting. Nagus is just not that kind of person, and that's why many people, including myself, like him. But forcing him to act in this more competitive quote role just doesn't really work in my opinion. You can even see A-Rob smiling to himself for some of these poses, because listening to him in interviews, he's equally a very mellow and chill guy, and I feel like this would have been a bit weird for him. Hocker's not too bad, but again, you can kind of tell he's just doing the moves he's been told to do. Now, as much as I talked about the need to build rivalries in the sport, track is often inhabited by quite humble people, so we maybe need to let these rivalries play out more organically so it doesn't feel forced for certain athletes like Nagus, for instance. We can also look to the Josh Kerrs of the sport to make this more organic rivalry develop a bit more. For instance, I wouldn't say Cole Hocker is someone to start a rivalry with anyone in particular, but I'm sure if Kerr started shit-talking him a little bit, he wouldn't back down from that challenge. Now we're on to the ugly, the real bad side of GST, and I know it's been mentioned before, but it's such a strange decision that I have to talk about. GST has different categories that every event is grouped into. You have the short sprints, long sprints, short distance, hurdles, etc. Every athlete competing is obliged to race in both events in their category. You get points on your position based on each race, and the winner of the slam and the prize money is the person who has the overall best score in every event. This is understandable if you want your stars competing in more than just one race, and it means GST can get their money's worth and we see more top level races. But then it gets weird when you look at some of the event categories and the races that they have signed. Some make sense, like the 100-200 or the 3K-5K category, but there are some really weird categories like the 200-400, both hurdles groups, and the 800-1500 meter category, to name a few. The broad problem is that the events grouped are relatively different in their nature, so you have very few athletes who are going to be strong in both. Let's take the hurdlers for instance. Yes, I'm sure all hurdlers do sprint training and can bash out a decent non-hurdle sprint, but forcing them to compete in an event that is simply not their speciality just seems a bit odd. And it puts athletes in an awkward position, because now they have to focus on training a discipline that they're not really competing at the world level at. And this could impact their skills in events like the 2025 World Champs, which of course they'll want to be in top shape for. With the sprint and distance examples, it's the same issue, but more due to the nature of how these events are in the present day. Drawing on my distance bias again, let's use the 800-1500 meter as an example. There are plenty of elite runners who focus on both these distances, but now the training meta seems to have shifted more to being a 1500 meter 5K specialist. A few years ago, the 800-1500 category would have made more sense. The 1500 was a very tactical event with a strong kick and good race strategy being especially important to win a championship medal. This meant you saw a lot of 800-1500 runners at the top level, Centrowitz, MacLeod, Kiprop to name a few. But since you have people like Timothy Cheruiyot and Jakob Ingebrigtsen as aggressive strength-based front runners being a juggernaut in the middle and long distance world, having enough strength to keep up with the punishing pace they will force is very important. If you look at Hocker, Nagus and Kerr's training, they essentially say themselves that they are like 5K runners in the winter build-up, which gives them the aerobic strength needed in the 1500 meter today. Same as Jakob Ingebrigtsen. There are really not many current medal contenders who are 800-1500 meter specialists. Hobbs Kessler is one name thrown out a lot, but he's kind of an exception to the rule, and he's not yet someone you would bet to medal against the big four of 1500 meter running. Hocker, Kerr and Nagus are all strong signings with a solid fan base and loads of credentials behind them, but they are also guys who are simply not that strong on the 800 meter because it's not their primary event. Marco Arop, the fourth racer in the short distance category, is an incredible 800 meter runner, but he has a 3:38 PB in the 1500 meter, set in 2023. This means we'll probably see some really fun 1500 meter races between three 1500 meter guys, but Arop will consistently be trailing well behind them. It gets worse in the 800 because Arop is going to destroy the 1500 meter guys, running likely a 142 or 143 times minimum, whilst the others struggle to go sub 145. Now I know a lot of their PBs are outdated and they'll presumably be treading their weaker events much more now, but even in a good scenario, I think we'd be shocked to see Arop podium in the 1500 meter and not win the 800 meter unless a fall or injury gets in the way. The risk is that you'll see a lot of these races look comical because there's such a mismatch between the races. Hopefully they put some solid versatile athletes in the challenges section to make the 800 meter look a bit less silly, but that would risk devaluing the names of the racers, which of course GST would want to avoid. It's not a good look if the random freelance athletes beat some of GST's key signings. It could also lead to some kind of counterintuitive and underwhelming results, because the winner of a race is not necessarily going to be the best in the slam. I mean, let's say Arop dominates the 800 meter, but then becomes 5th in the 1500 meter, whilst Kerr comes 2nd in both events. Kerr would finish ahead of Arop despite not winning a single race, and Arop arguably having the more eye-catching performances. Because let's be real, he is probably going to destroy everyone in the 800 meter. So you can very easily have this situation where an athlete wins a slam without ever actually winning an event, especially if you have one or two challengers like a Hobbs Kessler who can actually go for podium places. And I feel like this would just be a little awkward and underwhelming. The biggest mystery in all this to me is why they just didn't do individual events, or let athletes pick the disciplines they want to specialise in if you insist on having two events. As an example, why not let some of the guys who are 1500 meter and 3K or 1500 meter and 5K performance? Ultimately, I think it's best they do individual events and half the prize money for each slam to compensate, because they would still be levels ahead of the Diamond League prize fund. There are plenty of other issues as well that people have talked about. Another big thing is the exclusion of field events and Johnson's generally dismissive attitude to the field scene. And this seems pretty strange to me, especially since the last year, with names like Mondo Duplantis being so successful. I also just don't buy that you can't make these athletes interesting with the right athletes in marketing. I mean, if you compare it to an event like the 5K, which is in Grand Slam's roster right now, you can argue that it's very boring to a casual viewer, with the first 9 laps just being people running around a track with no stakes. The 5K also has very little stars because most of the runners are humble East African athletes, and it's just not really in their nature to start trash talking each other. Nonetheless, GST have still invested in the 5K, and I'm grateful for that. There's also a couple of other questionable decisions with GST, such as the locations of their meets. People have pointed out the very American-centric focus, and of course as a European I will be biased. They did try and get London apparently, but UK Athletics weren't willing to take the financial risk given that they're broke. But I still do feel like they could have done a meet in Europe somewhere. Maybe if they'd signed Jakob to the 3K, 5K event as a challenger, then Oslo would be a really good shout. Maybe somewhere in Switzerland, they always seem to sell out their tickets nicely. Overall, I do think GST will be a positive for the sport, and I am looking forward to the slams and seeing how the league develops in general. They certainly seem to be throwing the Diamond League into a bit of a panic, which will hopefully inspire them to up their game. But given that Johnson is touting himself as the saviour of track and that this is going to be the revolution that track needs, I'm not so sure just yet. If you get rid of this stupid category system, then maybe we can start talking a little bit more. If you want to see why Josh Kerr's YouTube debut with Grand Slam track failed, then click on this video here. If you want to see my thoughts on why no one watches elite running and potentially how to fix that, then click on this video here. Thank you very much for watching the video. Please let me know your thoughts on Grand Slam track in the comments. I'm very curious to hear, and I'll see you in the next one. Happy training.